Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program. This is a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of the Infinity series and founder of Engine Books. Let's see what we have today.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another great episode of the Write Project podcast. I know I say they are all great episodes, but this one really is. Coming down to us from the United States, or up to us from the United States, is Heather Antos, one of the editors of many, many different comics. Basically, an editor of my childhood and my godchildren's childhood, although my childhood's still ongoing, but some of my favorite runs of comics ever, like Deadpool, all of Star Wars for a good few year period, partial creator of Gwenpool. I will ask her about that in a second to see how she prefers to be credited about that. Just a ridiculous amount of amazing work. As someone who has followed comics for way too long, and Marvel Comics in particular, I can say that she is my favorite editor since Jim Shooter, and possibly my favorite editor ever. Just everything she touches is absolute gold, and I am honored to be here with her. Thank you for coming on, Heather Antos.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much.
No worries. All of it true.
I have all these warm fuzzies now. This is just so lovely.
Awesome. Okay, so you just got a job, if I'm reading things correctly, you just got put back on Star Wars and stuff like that. So that is super fun. Can you tell us about the books that you're working on right now for people who want to who is she? She's amazing. I'm going to go check out the stuff she has a hand in. Tell us about the books you're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm working for a publisher called IDW, and I am overseeing the entire Star Wars Adventures line. So for those who are not in the know, the Star Wars Adventures line is the all ages, more kid-friendly line of Star Wars comics. And we touch on, the prequel era, the classic era, the new, the sequel era, I guess that's what people are calling it. As well as we're also doing the High Republic Adventures, which is, the unique era that is only touching upon in Star Wars publishing right now across Marvel Comics, IDW, books, and it's all happening at the same time, and it's really, really cool. So, yeah.
That is really cool. Wait, okay, so you said something there that I gotta stop and rewind back on very quick. That's gonna get me in trouble with people. I love Star Wars. It's one of my favorite things ever. Me and my wife sit and cry over The Mandalorian 5 times a week. But what do you mean kid-friendly Star Wars? Isn't all Star Wars kid-friendly? It's for children and adults like me who won't let childhood go, and that's a good thing. But what do you mean kid-friendly Star Wars?
Well, it's definitely, the themes are definitely a lot more, kid-friendly and light, and, you're not dealing with heavy stuff like the dark side, and, my wife is pregnant with Force twins, and,
that's fair.
I'm the chosen one, right? There's a lot more, stories about the characters when they're younger, or a lot, they're just less heavy, I would say, as I like to say, that they're a good bedtime story.
It's really fun. That's cool. I like that.
And I think a lot of it too has to do more so with the art styles in particular that you see in the comics. It's a lot more cleaner, open line, cartoony styles that are more kid friendly, but as I like to say, they are all ages comics. They're not just for kids, but these are comics where, in Marvel, when I was working on those comics and we did, the Lando comic or Screaming Citadel, those were some darker, the Vader comic, those are some darker, heavier, serious stuff going on that, a kid might, appreciate but not fully be able to grasp what's going on in that. And so, these are less complex stories, but just as Star Wars is all Star Wars is.
Yeah. There you go. Now I'm picturing, like, I don't know. One thing I liked about Doctor Who back in the day is that, like, in its own continuity, like, you had Doctor Who, which was meant to be all ages, and then Sarah Jane Adventures, which was meant to be for younger people, and then Torchwood, which was like, oh no, this is everyone. The kids are gone to bed. Let's do Torchwood kind of thing. I'm picturing a future where Marvel has that, and they've got the Adventures line with you, and the regular Marvel Star Wars, and then there's like the Max line.
I don't think Lucasfilm will ever go for that.
No, that's probably not. And you know what? Probably for the best, because oh man, some of that was rough. Wonderful. That's really great. So for those who might not know, like, listening, and like I might be one of them, we'll see what your answer is, because I have in my mind, I work with editors as a writer. I know what an editor is to me, but I know that, like, in your job in comics, like, there's another level to it. Can you walk us through your day or week or month? Like, what does an editor do?
Sure. So yeah, no 2 days are the same as an editor in comics. But the closest comparison, and what I like to say an editor's job responsibility is very akin to like a TV producer or a movie producer. It is our job to source ideas and cast creators and maintain a budget and do marketing plans and, you know, give notes on content, on scripts, on layouts, on pencils, on inks, on colors, on covers, and make sure everything maintains its budget under deadline for, you know, 20 projects at a time. You know, wash, rinse, repeat every single month. So it's a little bit, yeah, like I say, it's a little bit producer, a little bit glorified babysitter, and a little bit part-time therapist. Yep.
I've dealt with accountants and I've dealt with creatives, and dealing with them both at once actually doesn't sound like fun. That sounds like, is there enough coffee in the world for what you do?
I definitely drink a lot of coffee.
Yep. That sounds
intense. And then they created alcohol coffee, like the crossover. So that's good for, like, you know, when it's like late afternoon, like,
yep.
You know, like,
yep. It's the transition drink.
Exactly. It's perfect.
Yeah. Amazing. Wait, okay, that's way more than I thought. I was like I had no idea that like the budgetary part of it was on.
Yeah. Like, I mean, so if I could hire, you know, Stuart Eminem or Francesco Francavilla or, you know, Alex Ross for every single project, of course I would. But, you know, they're worth every penny that you pay them for, and comics cost a lot of money to make. Yep. You know, and so absolutely there are budgets, and every single book you work on at any single publisher is going to have a budget that you have to stick within. And, you know, some publishers will be like, oh, you can only spend X amount on a writer, on a cover. You know, they'll break it up into different disciplines, or they'll be like, you get X amount for this entire book, split it up however you want to. But yeah, like, it's definitely on the editor to make sure you're sticking within those numbers.
That's interesting. So, like, on those books, when how much free reign are you given? So, like, I'm just interested now. I'm just going to follow down this rabbit hole. Like, okay, so if it was a book that, like, one of the books where basically you got the budget for the whole book and you got to go with it, kind of thing. Give me a rough estimate. How much trouble would you be in if, say, you hired Stephen King to do the writing, but that took up all the budget, so the art was all stick figures?
Well, so here's the thing. You can get approvals to go over budget or things like that. And, you know, if you get a writer, say, like Stephen King on something, that's going to factor into the P&L that you're going to be given. The P&L is your profit and loss sheet that every single, you know, project has. And, you know, usually you'd say a bigger name creator, a bigger name character, a bigger name, you know, whatever, is going to then hopefully turn more profit or make more money. And so if, you know, Stephen King comes on board and you're like, all right, well, if Stephen King is going to write this book, we have to pay him, you know, like $100,000. And we normally would only pay a writer, you know, for, let's say it's an OGN, we normally only pay a writer like 10 grand or 30 grand or whatever it would be. But it's Stephen King, and we expect we'll make, 5 times the amount we normally would or whatever. Then you get a little bit more room and stuff like that to play. But yeah, I mean, that's where I say, strategy comes into play. Like, is Stephen King is spending this much on a writer worth it? Yep. Is there an artist that I know will pair well that fits within this budget? Do I need to go and ask for a different budget? Do I need to negotiate with Stephen to see if he'll take a different price? Yep. There's a lot of tactics at play, and it's a lot of, there are, to be a really good editor, it's not just about being really good at story, because obviously that is important. That is a big part of our jobs, but it is being very, very good at negotiating with people and communicating in general, to, hey, I know this isn't your normal rate, but, can we work something out? If you do this for this rate, I can get you these 2 other things or whatever. There's a lot of that goes into play, and, using relationships, and, creators like to work with editors that they feel respect their vision and, aren't going to screw them over, are going to make sure they get paid on time. And so there's a lot that goes into that as well, that factors into all of these decisions that are being made.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is a lot more into the business side of it than I would have thought. I mean, that is very much like Shark Tank level, I'm going to negotiate all this. I was, and forgive me for being ignorant, but I was just kind of I assumed that you had a high level of fingers in every pot when it came to the creative side of it, and that all the business stuff was I didn't even think that was on the editorial chain. I thought that was way up corporate, but that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, apologies if you can hear the train in the background.
It's fine. It makes it cool. We don't have trains here because we made the tracks the wrong size.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, no, as I like to say, I live next to a train station, and the benefits of that are you live next to a train station, but the cons to that are you live next to a train station. So.
Yeah, I can picture it if you're trying to get something creative done, it being interesting.
But yeah, no, it's I think at least in my experience, editors can be as involved into some of the more business decisions as they want to be or try to be. There are definitely editors that want nothing to do with it and keep me out of it, and you handle the marketing and I don't want to be involved and I don't care, whatever. It's not, my expertise, X, Y, and Z. But I come from, indie filmmaking. I'm used to collaborating, and I come from self-publishing as well. So I'm used to being in the trenches and kind of wearing a bunch of different hats, and I like that. And if there's something that I know that marketing is doing or marketing needs, and I can figure out some way to help that or amplify that or keep that in mind in the creation of the book, or keep marketing in the loop with things that are happening in the book and vice versa and things like that, it's only going to make a better product at the end of the day. So yeah, I don't know. I'm fascinated by all parts of the publishing machine. So, which I think, I don't know, I like to think makes me good at my job.
No, it sounds amazing. That sounds wonderful. I think from the sounds of things, it's no wonder that you keep finding work. Whenever you are say gone from one project, there's always another project on the horizon, because I'm the business side of me, usually on this show I only have to deal with the creative side of me, but the business side of me right now is woo, I gotta find someone like her locally. That's great. That's awesome. Is there a Newfoundland chapter of Heather Antos? That's wonderful. My lord.
I don't know. I do come from Michigan, which I like to say is Canada's cousin, so.
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. You actually had a pretty significant history in I hope this isn't a weird term, but geek journalism for a while there, and still do. If I'm getting my timeline of events right, that's where you got your start. But if I'm wrong about that, please correct me.
I mean, sort of, yeah. It's interesting. So when I was in college, just kind of for fun, I started doing like comic reviews and movie reviews just as like a thing to do and to write. And I had a bunch of friends that, you know, were comic creators locally, and I started doing like I had a column at one site I wrote that was called Under the Radar, and it's where I would like, you know, pick all these different indie books that like you should know if you don't know. And like from there I got asked to go to different conventions, and that's how I guess I started to build my reputation with different creators and stuff. But like when I started going into that, like I had no intention of ever like working in comics professionally. Like I kind of just stumbled into it. I like truly in college, like my goal was film. I wanted to work in film. That was always what I wanted to do. And then my senior year of college, I just kind of decided I don't want to do that anymore. Screw the last 20 years of education of my life, whatever, you know, that's fine. And a good friend of mine actually said to me, he was like, well, you really like comics. Like, why don't you just do that? And like, it had never crossed my mind that working in comics was like an actual thing I could do and pursue, even though I had been very much ingrained in the scene for like several years at that point.
Well, I mean, like, there's a part of you, if you love comics, that refuses to believe that comics have anyone behind the scenes. Like, there's a part of me that whenever I talk to someone from your camp is like, oh, you mean the Fantastic Four don't just call Stan and Jack and like tell them what they did that day, like it said back in the letters pages, you know? That's sad.
Yeah, no, I think like for me it was just like, you know, like that, especially growing up in a very small town in Michigan, like, you know, on career day, it's not like, oh, here's the writer of Batman coming to talk about what he does for a living, you know. And I'd always loved writing, I'd always loved drawing, but it was never something that like for me I thought could be a job or anything like that. And like comics editor definitely wasn't a job that crossed my mind until I started pursuing, like looking at like, okay, in comics, like what makes sense, what's something that I could do or fit in or would like doing. Because I never, like, you know, everyone always asks me like, well, do you ever think about writing comics or drawing comics? And like, absolutely not. I have no interest in doing either of those things, you know. So yeah, it literally just came about from me like flipping through comics and realizing, oh, the same people are editing literally every single book I'm reading. Like there must be something to that. Let me figure out what it is that they do.
Yeah, and that's kind of when I was running through, like in the week previous to this interview, just kind of going through you have a comic find page, and where it, like anything you have a list on, it says it lists you as a character. You've been in this many issues, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm just kind of going through and being like, oh man, like there was a 5-year period where if I loved a book, you were on it in some way, shape, or form, which is just crazy. Because there's a I got it, damn sorry. But yeah, no, it's really weird to notice that, because you know, as a comic reader, you know, you breeze past the credits as quickly as humanly possible. Like back in the day, you'd stop to see what nicknames Sam and Jack gave themselves and then move on.
Well, right. Like, I mean, who really, except in this era of like post-credit scenes, like who watches the credits in a movie? No one gives a shit about who actually makes the thing, right? Like, yeah. But yeah, no, and it's I think that, and I think social media has helped / hurt this, but like, I think people are now starting to pay way more attention to who is, you know, creating the content, which I think is really cool.
It is, but like at the same time, you're right. I think there is a hurt aspect to that, because like, I don't know. I think about all the things that really, my other big editor that I love, I mentioned at the beginning, was Jim Shooter. I remember reading his blog and all like this and all the stuff that he did there. I don't know your feelings on it. I'm not going to ask. I don't know what he's like in person or anything like that, or anything like that. But like, I just think of all the things the changes that were happening in that part of Marvel, like in that era, like bloody black costume Spider-Man, like stuff like that, that had Twitter existed, they might have backtracked on that immediately. You know what I mean? Like how many cool things are we missing out on because there's just this immediate backlash instead of wait 2 to 3 months for a few fan letters to come in, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it is really interesting. I have a very interesting relationship with social media, with comics in particular, and it's not quite what you're probably thinking of or what anyone listening is thinking of, but like literally I owe my career to social media.
Interesting.
When I was trying to figure out, like what I want to do in comics, is there a career for me in comics? What does that look like? And I started looking at, an editor. What does an editor do? I know what an editor at a traditional publishing house does, but they only work with a writer. Like there's all these other people involved. What can a comic editor, possibly do? And I literally just tweeted comics editors, like this was back like the 20 teens, where social media was still like really young and really, really starting out. And I was just very fortunate in that, Jordan White, who later became my boss at Marvel, and Scott Alley, who, mentored me for a while, like they responded to my, literally I was just tweeting like, hey, I want to learn about comic editing. Will you talk to me? And they said yes. And, I met up with Jordan White at C2E2 and like we sat and had a conversation for like an hour, and Scott Alley started like, basically just via email and phone calls, we would just chat and talk comics and get little lessons here and there. And like I learned how a comic editor edits comics because of that and because of them and because of this, relationship I was able to build. And the first comics project I ever did was this anthology called Unlawful Good, an anthology of crime that I kickstarted, and like that was my first like, can I even edit comics? Do I even want to make comics? Do I even like this? Like it was this thing that would not have happened had it not been for social media, had it not been for the other creators I was able to find via social media, had it not been for the support of other comics creators on social media and Kickstarter and fans to be able to fund and support this and make it. At the time, it was one of the biggest comics Kickstarters that that Kickstarter had ever had on its platform. And so like there is so much positivity in comic social media that I really, really love. And I am so grateful and so thankful for that. And that's why if you follow me on Twitter, you might know I do this thing called Signal Boost Sunday, where the first Sunday of every month from 9 to 5, I basically just retweet and boost any creator who comes to my page. And that's sort of my, like, a lot of people supported me, and I wouldn't have found the career I have if it wasn't for this platform and the positivity and kindness of others. And so I want to help share that and help kind of spread using social media as as a positive place to promote other people and support other creators instead of all this constant like negativity and tearing people down.
Yeah, which is important. There's part of the reason that I'm not on Twitter. Well, part of it's because I'm old, but part of it is because, like, oh my God, I'm just sick of following them, and 5 seconds later, it's their page has devolved into anarchy or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? Like and it's so easy to fall down the rabbit hole. I don't want this to become a Twitter thing about how much I loathe social media sometimes, but it's always fun, and it feels like I don't understand people with that level of negativity. I just don't. Yeah,
I don't know. It's a lot of projection, I like to say.
yeah, for sure. Can I ask you, rewinding back onto track a little bit to not fall down that rabbit hole and let's stay positive, just like your Twitter feed. Um, can I ask you what your favorite project you've worked on that you are not working on now was? Because I've talked to people before, and everyone's like, "Oh," and it's always
I can't tell you. Yeah,
it's half no, but it's also half marketing. It's like, what I'm working on now, please buy it. No. Like,
yeah, no. Oh gosh, it's gotta be. I always have to say, like, I mean, Gwenpool and that first run of Gwenpool, I'm so proud of that book and what we created, and I've been a part of a lot of things that, you know, resonate with fans. You know, working on Star Wars, obviously it's such a global thing that it's a constant with fans. But like Gwenpool really brought out a really unique connection with fans that I haven't seen, you know, and still, like, to this day, well, not to this day because there's a pandemic and we can't go to conventions, but when conventions were a thing, like, I would have, you know, like, these middle-aged dads come up to me and just, like, you know, like, thank you, I have something I can read with my daughter, you know, my daughter loves comics because of this. And that's, like, part of, you know, some of the stories and characters that I've worked on and has always been, like, a huge focus of mine is I was never into superhero comics growing up, because I never really felt like they were for me. And, you know, and working in characters like Aphra, like Gwenpool, you know, for me it was important, like, I want something that, like, a teen girl who can connect to and love and all of that. And so Gwenpool was just such a special comic, especially in that, to have a brand new character that's not tied into any event or any other major character in any way, shape, or form, to have a series last 25 issues plus 3, you know, plus 1 backup series and 3, like, one shots, like, that's huge. Huge. Gambit can't last, you know, a series that long. Like, classic characters can't do that. And so, like, that in and of itself is just, like, super incredible, and I'm just so grateful to have, you know, been able to be a part of it and had the support to, you know, work on a comic like that.
Yeah, I'm always hopeful that she'll find her way back into things. Because every so often she'll pop up again. I really enjoyed her character. Actually, funnily enough, what you were saying there a second ago about it, like, guys that would come up to you and say, "Oh, like, I can have this for my daughter or read this with my daughter." It's gotten her into it. I started a few years ago. There was a friend of mine that I was talking to. I can't remember what it's about. I think it was about Modern Family or something like that, like the TV show. And we were, I could not get some of the plot lines. Like, I couldn't gel with it. And we were having a chat. One of the times, I'm having a drink. This is my oldest friend, Sarah Thompson. Like, she's a writer too and stuff like that. And she has no problem telling me what an idiot I am sometimes, because I'm very often an idiot and I need to be told. But she was like, "Well, it's not for you." And it's just this moment of, like, I'm way too old to have come to this realization, but that media was made sometimes for me and sometimes it's not. So I love Gwenpool and a couple other titles that were coming out at the same time, Miss Marvel, Dr. Aphra, a couple others. I started to purposely seek out things that weren't made for me, and it was really fun. Like, it's like, oh, okay, cool. And sometimes it's challenging in a way that, like, early reading was challenging. Like, I think we get into a place, and I've got an English major, so I'm used to be, like, challenged by literature and people, like, bothering to try and seek out stuff that's different. But I think that's important. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's fun to be like, this isn't for me. Let's see if it can affect my point of view. It's fun.
Yeah, it's weird. Other perspectives exist other than your own in the world, right? Like,
yes, it's something most people learn when they're 3. So that's it. I learned it when I was 30, so that was real impressive for me. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.